Okay. So I really appreciate it. And listen, I know the last few days and the last day or two have been particularly difficult for people now that we know we're going into another lockdown. So it would be remiss of me not to mention that I'm very cognizant of the fact, and I really thank people for coming here this evening, because I know facing into the next 6 weeks, things like this may be very, I suppose, not the highest priority on people's agenda, because a lot of people are going to be losing jobs, facing working from home again, and facing a lot of restrictions and difficulties. So I really thank people for coming here, and I am cognizant that we're going to be facing some tough times. So I'm going to get cracking with the presentation. Thanks everyone for coming. We're talking about the Fosterstown Strategic Housing Development Proposal and what exactly it means for us. Okay, so firstly, what is a strategic housing development? The first 3 lines there are essentially the legislation, what governs the strategic housing development. But what are they? They are planning applications for housing developments of more than 100 residential units and 200 or 200 plus student bed spaces, which can now be made directly to onboard Planala. It is new legislation which allows for this type of application, and it was enacted in 2016 and brought into effect in the 3rd of July 2017. It's a new type of application that has been introduced as part of Rebuilding Ireland to speed up planning application process and accelerate the delivery of large housing and student accommodation proposals. So, sounds okay, but what does it actually mean? Essentially, fast-track element, albeit sounding good in writing, have resulted in hundreds of developments bypassing local authorities. The elected official and planning department can merely put in observation to strategic housing developments, as can the lay person for a cost of €20. This means, in many instances, plans have been granted by Onboard Planala, which not only contravene local development plans, but negatively impact on the council's ability to fund, develop infrastructure and improvements, which such sites developments offset. So there's been many instances, more so in Dublin City Council, in relation to Dublin City Council, that they just haven't been able to cope with the infrastructure.
I don't know.
Sorry, I'll mute you there.
The promo.
I'm just going to mute them there. Okay. So we need to have appropriate development done in a sustainable manner, and strategic housing development process prevents this from happening, in my opinion. So what we'll be looking at in this presentation, we'll be looking at plans for the land zoned as Fosterstown. We'll be comparing the master plan released in May 2019 from Fingal County Council against this proposal, weighing up the pros and cons and discrepancies in both. We acknowledge the legislation regulations regarding to the specific issue. Hopefully people will leave with some key points to develop their observations and objections on. What are they asking for? Well, if anyone's seen the development, they're asking for 278 apartments, 125 one beds, 146 two beds, and 7 the number of 3 beds. I'm going to delve into the nitty gritty of it in a few minutes, but that's just a quick overview of what the plan is actually asking for. So, the site in question and the land owned by the developer. So the developer is MKN Development, and I'll go into MKN Development toward the end of the presentation. But just to give you an idea, if you can see my cursor here, the land zoned in blue here is the land owned by the developer. And the land in red is the land the developer is planning to build on, in this case. So because the developer has multiple lands, it's obviously going to be a phased development. So this would be the first phase of a larger development, which is the same as the Fingal Fosterstown master plan. So you see the land there anyway, and the land for this part of the development is 2.64 hectares or 5.24 acres. So this is a view from the side of Airside, and you can see there the land proposed and the land owned by the developer. And you see the land around the area that is yellow and black. That land there is actually part of the Fosterstown master plan the Fingal County Council developed in May 2019. And I actually can't find out, or haven't been able to find out today, if that land is under council ownership yet, or is it still under private ownership. I haven't been able to find out. I just know the developer doesn't own it as of yet. And if you see in the top right hand corner where my mouse is, it's the same developer that built 165 units in Ridgewood. So the developer knows the area well. And this plan's talking about Metrolink and Bus Connects and other things, but we'll delve into that anyway. This is just an aerial view. The next one is an aerial view from above River Valley Rise, and you can see the site here. This is the laneway off River Valley Grove. As you go left, this is 1 Hawthorne Park, and this is where the proposed junction for the new road is. And I'll delve into that a little bit later on. And as you can see, the development goes all the way up past the 2 houses on the Forest Road, past Oulart, and stops there before Forest Hills. But I will go into further detail. I don't mean to rush along. So, Block A, as I said earlier, is 6-storey in height, and it's immediately adjacent to Hawthorne Park. And it goes back to the rear to 9 stories. Block B, being 5 stories in height, going to 7, is immediately opposite the laneway on Forest or River Valley Grove and Oulart. I have some pictures that make it clearer later on. So what will it look like? This is the Forest Road at the moment. This is Hawthorne Park, the adjacent laneway leading onto the Grove. And this is what it will look like if the plan to build a 6-storey unit goes ahead. As you can see, they have widened the footpaths, included 2 cycle lanes, removed the trees. And as part of the Fosterstown master plan, which I thought was a great idea in this aspect, the trees were retained and the cycleway and new pathway were placed on the far side of the trees, and the road was extended by removing the pathway on the left and altering the pathway on the right-hand side, and including a cycleway there, and having the indicative cycle lane and path inside the tree line, which I actually thought was a good idea for the Fosterstown plan. This plan is merely removing most of the trees and widening the road, but we can discuss the nitty-gritty later on, but that's just an idea of what it looks like now and what they're proposing. Okay, so this is Block A from the front. So this is A here, and Hawthorne Park is directly opposite it. Block A from the back, this is the 9 stories at the back, just for visualization so people can get an idea. Okay, so how close are the apartments to the houses fronting the Forest Road? Well, the SHD says in the statement of consistency with planning policy on page 54, in addition, the separation distance between the proposed apartment blocks fronting the Forest Road and the adjacent existing dwellings, mainly gable end to road, is generally in excess of 30 metres. So they're saying generally there's 30 metres between where our development meets old or pre-existing residential development. Generally being the optimal word, and this is the only image they use in the actual statement. Funny, because when I go to the next slide, generally is very much a loose term. Distance from Block A to adjoining home in Hawthorne Park is 26.054 metres. Now, they don't say that because they say every other measurement in their estimation is over 30 metres. So it would be remiss of them to really say, well, actually, Block A affects the house in Hawthorne Park in a more of a manner than the Block B does, which is a smaller block, a 5-storey block to the house in the Grove. Still, I think it's overdevelopment and too much of a height, which we'll discuss later. But if you see here, shadow shown as an accurate regards light impact. So they're saying the shadow impact would not even protrude the first cycle lane on the new development. Now, this is a very bad photo, but if you look at the widening of the road and you look at their own interpretation, you can see the shadow from the 6-storey unit clearly protruding the whole way across to the gable end of the house in Hawthorne Park, and that's on a beautiful, bright day. So I don't buy their logic. Firstly, they try to disguise the fact that there actually is more than 30 metres from the front of their building to an existing 2-storey dwelling, and they also I don't think they're 100% fair in regards to shadowing impact, which is a huge part of the guidelines regards height. Okay, so let's look at what the Fosterstown master plan looks like in relation to this. So just so people have an idea where I'm talking about, junction at Hawthorne Park is here. This is the 3-storey, 2-storey, 3-storey, 2-storey, 3-storey. Oulart is here. Baru Court is here. Beriva Laurels, Beriva Birches and Willows are over around this side. And you can see everything fronting the Forest Road. That's where the new school is proposed. and Front and Bereava, the 2-story dwellings in some states, they're all 2 and 3 stories, protected by a current tree line, which continues and allows the environment to grow in the same manner that it is. And as you can see, there's a consistent progression in heights as it goes towards the Pinnacle roundabout, away from current residential stories, which I think people will accept. So the max height at 7 stories to the rear Pinnacle. In fact, that's probably not the case. They actually want to build a hotel there, but I'll discuss that later on. Anyway, this is the Fosterstown development plan. And as you can see, I just wanted to highlight the proposed school. We'll come back to this. I just wanted to acknowledge that the heights are different. So, in my opinion, this SHD completely contradicts the heights laid out in the development plan. For example, in the development plan from Fingal County Council, the height rationale for Fosterstown takes cognizance of all existing developments in the surrounding area, and its strategic position along the R132 heights on the land will range from 2 to 9 stories. Heights will not exceed 2 and 3 stories along the Forest Road and the fronting of the houses at Bereava Willows. So as I said, they're very cognizant of the fact that we need to build up, we need mixed development accommodations, but the houses existing there should not be overburdened by 6 and 7 story houses as we have proposed here. So they say the building heights and typology proposed consider development form and structure that is compatible with the adjacent communities. Density and height respectively transition downwards towards residential dwellings to the south and west. The R132 provides the opportunity to develop higher density building types with a potential for a landmark building at Pinnacle Roundabout. That essentially is the hotel they're talking about. And then I'll show you what this SHD is saying. So this is what the SHD says in terms of heights. It respectfully submits that On Board Penala should consider the proposed development as a material contravention of Fingal Development Plan 2017-2023, essentially something that contravenes it, which goes against the development plan. An appropriate justification is set out within the statement demonstrating that the proposed building heights, car parking and separation distances in this development are appropriate for the subject site. This second part essentially says the building height guidelines set out in 2018 warrant this. They don't. SHDs have tried to railroad things like this in all over. The Chiver site opposite Cadbury's there, you've seen it in Omni. They're building over and above the recommended heights and they're getting away with it. It's madness. It is absolutely madness. But there's no guidelines. The guidelines actually reflect what the development plan said, that they should be respectful to the communities and densities within the area. So this is just an overview of what the Fosterstown Master Plan proposes. As you can see, low 2 and 3 story densities bordering the current residential and gradually building to higher density as we go out, which I suppose is acceptable. I'm not going to go through all the writing, but you get the idea. And this is what they are saying. They're saying a graduation from houses to new developments. So they're saying there's a fair graduation from 6 to 9 stories, from 5 to 7, and from 6 to 7. I don't think it's a fair graduation. I think it's complete overdevelopment and a manipulation. In terms of car parking spaces, there's 206 residential car parking spaces for 278 residential units. That's a ratio of 0.74 car parking spaces to every unit. So it means that, you know, you could have 2 people living in one household and they're not even guaranteed a car parking spot, or you could have 5 people in a 3-bed household and they may only have 1 car parking spot. There's quite a lot of bicycle spots, which is great. And the idea behind the ratio, and they try to justify it by saying the Metrolink and the Bus Connect service will be fantastic in these areas. And if that's the case, why not make it a condition of any building the Metro be signed off on first? Why not make that a condition in your planning if you're so comfortable with the car parking spaces ratio? Because at the moment, there's, like, I know in my own home, there's 3 cars, myself, my mother, my father, and I'm living at home with my parents. And unfortunately, that's just a sign of the times. And we have 3 car parking spaces for 1 household. And I know that is a case in a lot of houses around the area. And it's not because we're not cognizant of the need to go green. It's just because we don't have the transport infrastructure in place at the moment. So this is the proposed site measurement on the site, measuring 2.64 hectares. And why is this important? Well, I'll tell you why. It's important because under the master plan guidelines, densities can be between 105 and 115 units per hectare. So that means you can have in that area, in that populated area where they've zoned, you can have 105 to 115 units per hectare. So this site is 264 hectares. So, and they have 278 units. That's 105.3 units per hectare. So they are in keeping with the master plan, aren't they? Yeah, they are. Yeah, absolutely not. No, that's just them manipulating the facts. In the image, you can see what's highlighted in blue. These areas are either bordering roads or zoned for true roads and cannot be developed in this project. They're simply added to increase land usage to manipulate densities versus site size. The true density is far from this. In reality, over 1/3 of the site cannot be developed and is not built on in this plan. So the real units per hectare, this is me being generous here, about 1.76 hectares of developmental land with 270 units. And I'm not lying, they don't state it, but they do say it in the drawings. So they do not tell you this, but it's in the drawings. So here's a drawing, the forest road here, all the way with the true road that they're planning to develop through the site. So in reality, this little section here is the only amount of land they can develop, yet they have nearly a whole hectare of land there that they're stating is part of the site, which it is, but it can't be developed. So it's disingenuous to say that they can. So here we are. So I was wrong. They don't put it in words, but they do say it. And I did see this in the architect design statement that there actually are. If I go back here, I want to say it's the net density here, net density of 105 to 115 units. They do hide the net densities in a drawing in the architect design statement. The actual net density is 150 units per hectare. So of the land they can develop, it's actually 150 units. So they say it, they just don't say it in the most genuine way, which is, I'm not surprised about. So I've done the maths. So the master plan guidelines densities can be between 105 and 115 units. This site is building 278 on 1.86 hectares, excluding open space required which is 149. So if we add the public open space, we get 2.2 hectares, say, with 278 units, which is 126.44 units per hectare. I know this is heavy stuff, but when we're putting in observations, it's important to know how they're manipulating it and the actual facts around it. So they are in fact over the guidelines by at least 11 units per hectare, which on a 6.5 hectare site, which is the amount of land they own, it results in an excess of 71 dwellings over what Fingal County Council proposes. And I wrote that before I looked at phase 2 and 3. It's actually far more than 71. But let's look at the minimum size of the apartment. So according to the design standards for new apartment guideline authorities that were released in 2018, a one bed with 2 people has to be a minimum of 45 square meters. This site is 49.6. So they're giving you a 4.6 square meters. Very good of them. 2 bed has to be 73. They're giving you 77.6 for 4 persons. Nice of them. 3 persons. I didn't know there was a 3 bed that could only hold 3 or 4 persons. I thought a 2 bed was a 2 bed. Obviously, it's a box room. 3 bed apartments have to be a minimum of 90 square meters. These are 97.8. So if you have one of the 7 3 beds, you're getting 7.8 square meters more than you're allowed legally. So in actual fact, they're relatively small apartments. They're not absolutely luxury. But anyway, what do we need? We need infrastructure first. We need to demand the infrastructure set down in the master plan goes ahead in phases stipulated. Specifically the link road, ideally meeting River Valley Junction. I have people coming in here. Sorry, guys. I'll jump into the chat now in a second. But as I was saying, we need to demand the infrastructure in the master plan. I feel having a junction less than 40 meters from another main junction does not make sense. So bringing the junction out to meet at Hawthorne Park, when we have a traffic light junction at River Valley there, it doesn't make sense. And what makes sense is bringing the junction down to meet River Valley, because they're going to buy Mrs. Crilly's house anyway, so they might as well bring the true road down that way, in my opinion. Just an important, the proposed school should have been built when Bereave and Ridgewood were being developed in 1999 to 2005. sorry, just so yeah, in my opinion and the opinion of many other councillors, we need Metrolink signed off on and tendered before any development occurs on the site. I think road infrastructure requirements of Fosterstown master plan need to be in the first phase, including school site access, etc. So what Fosterstown says is essential infrastructure for phase one before the metro comes into play. They say bus connect service needs to be there, pedestrian access needs to be there, upgrade to Pinnacle roundabout. This is the end, creating a new exit along with a through road off Pinnacle that will lead to the rear of Fosterstown development. The Metrolink station, as I said, the link road, new school and associated access, upgrade of the Forest Road to facilitate pedestrian and cycle movements, north and south internal road, realignment of Dublin Road, pedestrian cycle links to Fosterstown Metrolink, and upgrade to Pinnacle roundabout and provide improved links to airside. And they're just the other things. So what they're saying in Fosterstown is this infrastructure needs to be in there before you build 240 to 260 units, and then you have to include a school. So, as you can see, the phases are clear manipulation of land use. They also contradict the master plan. I just want you to look at phase two here, right? If you look at the size of phase two, remember 2.64 hectares in phase one, 278 units. Okay, phase two is 2.51 hectares. Okay, so it's smaller. So, a school promised pre-metro phase one, further density overreach. So densities, as noted earlier, are not vastly overreaching in many respects, or at least that's what they want us to think when they manipulated the densities in terms of site size. The reason being is because if phase one is granted without the appropriate infrastructure, which is likely to be the case, then phase two will be pushed through even though it is complete overdevelopment. Phase two is 400 units on a site that's actually smaller than the site we're at now. It's a site of 2.51 hectares. That equates to 159 units per hectare, and that's before you look at any open space or anything else. Max granted in this development, as I said earlier, is 105 to 115. So, they say here, phase two will consist of construction of block THIJ, 400 units, and the corridor there, public open space, and reservation for a school. As in, there's a place for a school there, but we're not going to build it. And this is exactly what phase two is saying. So phase two will bring you up to Brever birches, willows, and laurels. And you can see that all there. And yeah, that's just an example of that. So the Department of Education said, and I find this funny, this is in the consistency statement regards to school site. They talk about they don't need a school site. The site will be development as a school following consultation with the Department of Education to identify the level of demand in the area. So they say preliminary discussions have already taken place with the department, who have confirmed that I think the word school is missing there, is not required in the short term. I'm sorry, but anyone here who knows that we currently have a school in a car park in the main street sold because we can't get a location would be remiss to think that the Department of Education are actually stating to a developer that the school is not required in the short term. The school was required 5 years ago. So I just want to say, who asked questions to the department regarding the school? Well, Deputy Louise O'Reilly did in 2017, was the first one, along with other TDs. The current Minister for Housing asked, my colleague Claire Daly has asked, and what they've said is the Dublin area is the patron, and they're saying here essentially that the preferred option, they've identified a site and are working to progress the potential acquisition. The site they identified was the site of the church land in River Valley, which they weren't able to get off St. Lawrence O'Toole, the Scouts, or the community centre. So that land is no longer being zoned for the school, and they really need to look at Fosterstown. Us as councillors tried to CPO the land, which is a compulsory purchase order, but they're very reluctant on it, which is sad because it's an ideal location and we know we need a school. This is funny, guys. I think you'll find this funny. For some reason, I don't know where they're doing their measure from, measurements from, but they say Holy Family is the school that's furthest away from the site, according to the Swords Community Local Needs Audit. Now, I can't fathom that, because in my opinion, Holy Family, if you look here, is, from my estimation, I dropped a pin at where the site starts. It's 1.1 kilometres. It's absolutely the closest school. But what's convenient here, and I don't know if it's a mistake, but they say schools that are closest are St. Columbkille's Girls and Boys School and St. Conan's Junior National School, which I find funny, because both them schools have places available and are not oversubscribed, unlike Holy Family. But it's not viable for people living in that area to get to and from River Valley or Bereava or Ridgewood to those areas in the morning with the traffic density and get to work. COVID might have changed things for some people, but in reality, it's not viable. And it's a clear manipulation telling on board Penala that these schools are closer than Holy Family. Holy Family is by any stretch of the imagination, it's the closest school, and it's oversubscribed, hence why we need another school in the area. So I really don't buy that, and I think the distances are a bit unfair. That's just nearly done now. Phase 2 for the school goes against plans for the area, but how can we guarantee a school? Firstly, there's no mention of River Valley Community National School, which is currently residing in a car park on Main Street. And they say we don't need a new school in the short term. This has to be a condition of phase 1. It really, really does. Any councillor or any TD or any public representative in the area will tell you people in this area in South Swords are crying out for a primary school. And the secondary schools are going to be oversubscribed soon. Especially now with COVID, we need ample space to provide education for kids. So just a quick point here, transport and green infrastructure. As I said earlier, cycle infrastructure and green infrastructure inside the tree line on the Forest Road, both to maintain privacy and minimise environmental impact while creating a safe, sustainable and green road infrastructure. That's what's proposed in the Fosterstown plan. This plan proposes to get rid of quite a few trees and to open the road up, which some people might think would look great, but I actually like the rural feel to the Forest Road, and I think if it can be maintained and upgraded, it would look fantastic. I would be more than happy to see the path and cycle infrastructure inside the tree line on the Forest Road rather than culling a load of trees. So I thought this was quite funny. The planners are so far removed, they have no idea regarding the local area. So according to the planners here, the most local GAA club is Fingallians, when it's actually St. Finian's. But not remiss that there's a huge amount of people that live in the local area in Fingallians Parish who would actually play for St. Finian's. That is true. But what's definitely not true is that Swords Manor Football Club is the local football club. They don't mention St. Finian's or River Valley Rangers in their community audit, yet they're clearly the most local GAA and football club. I just thought, when you're looking at these plans, you think these people must just Google search local football clubs and put a footnote in, because they really haven't any idea regards the local area if they're thinking these are the local clubs. As much as they're great local sports clubs, they're not the most local clubs to that site. So just a little quick comparison of both clubs regards, or both sites regards trees and biodiversity. You can see here the plan for this SHD. The trees are sporadic and neat in nature, and open up at the roads, and you can see the widening of the roads quite clear in this drawing. This drawing isn't as clear, but the plans were to create a cycle infrastructure inside the tree line here all the way up and retain as many trees as possible on the Forest Road. So that's just in terms of trees and biodiversity. So who is developer? MKN Group. They developed Ridgewood, and they have fantastic infrastructure. They have won awards and all from Fingal Chamber, which is fantastic for them. They developed the biggest and largest scale site in Swords with only one access in and out, which is create an absolute traffic nightmare for people living in Ridgewood. So congratulations to them. In March 2005 was the final phase of the development of Ridgewood, apparently. According to them, the final phase of its development in the area happened in March 2005. Well, actually Ridgewood is still being developed, and Mall Fur House is being developed, but I do think they need more infrastructure in place. But that was from the Irish Times in 2005. So where do we go from here? Well, SHT applications and submissions. How do we make a submission? All right, this is where it gets hard, particularly now during COVID and as we go into a lockdown. I rang on board Penala today and they weren't able to update me with regards if there's going to be an extension due to COVID-19. But you make it in writing, print it out, include your €20 fee. You have to state your name and address. If your planning agent or other person is making the submission on your observation, both your names and addresses must also be stated. State the subject matter of the submission and or observation. For example, provide us with the details of on broad Penala case number or details. State the reasons for your arguments. Make sure the submission or observation is received 5 weeks of the date of receipt of on board Penala, which is the 11th of November is the final date for submissions in this one. And deliver your submission or observation together with a fee to a member of on board Penala staff at our office. So they want you to go into their office and deliver it. And they haven't changed these rules during COVID, which I think is absolute lunacy. But you can also post your submission or observation to us, but you must make sure your submission arrives before the final. So what it looks like. So that's an example of my submission for the Lord Mayor's. My address is actually at the end page. But as you can see here, it's the on board Penala 64 Marlborough Street, Dublin 1, the date, planning application number, case number, the name, site size, and submission on behalf of. So that's kind of the basic infrastructure, you say, or basic framework to write a submission. This is this current one. The case number is on board Penala 308-366/4/20. Application hasn't been given yet, but that's just the case number. And yeah, so who do we lobby? Usually SHDs are outside of the remit of councillors and TDs, but the Minister for Housing and Local Government and Heritage is Darragh O'Brien. We need to lobby him regarding the SHD process, how consultation mechanism is madness during COVID, how heights in their development are disgraceful, particularly fronting the Forest Road, how the land for River Valley Community National School needs to be CPO'd and built as soon as possible. The indicative infrastructure, roads, cycleways and school need to be present before any houses are built. And in my opinion, Metrolink needs to be signed off on before a brick is laid. Phase 2 cannot commence without Metrolink. And that's how we contact Darragh O'Brien, minister@housing.gov.ie or darragh.o'brien@oior.ie will work rather than the full Oireachtas. I'll share this presentation with everyone anyway. So, questions. That's just